Folks, thanks for coming on with us today. My name is John Dubas with Premier Marketing, and we'll be spending the next hour or so giving you a ton of information about working the LIS and MSP Medicare opportunities. Nice to start out a day with a bunch of acronyms, isn't it? LIS, Low Income Subsidy or Extra Help, the programs that the government has in place to help with the cost of medications for those who are on Medicare, and MSPs, Medicare Savings Programs, additional programs that the government has for individuals to help them with the cost of their medical coverage and the medical cost within that coverage as well. We'll spend about an hour going through a ton of information, including a lot of slides that are very numbers intensive. Pardon me for that, but I want you to have the information and keep in mind that today's presentation is being recorded, and it, along with a link to the recording, the PowerPoint presentation we're using for today, and a bunch of additional resource material will be sent to everyone who has RSVP'd for today's presentation. I would ask you to watch your spam filters for that follow-up, because we are doing a number of attachments to an email, and sometimes those attachments will lead our follow-up into your spam filters, and we'll happily resend it as well, but check there within the next day or so if you don't receive the follow-up to today's presentation. A bit of background about our organization to start. Premier is a national marketing organization that was founded in 1968. That's part of the Integrity Marketing Platform. We have offices across the country, and we act as an insurance wholesaler, offering insurance services to the public through relationships with independent insurance agents such as yourself. We offer those contracts to those independent agents at the highest possible commission levels, with recruiting contracts available for those who qualify. As I mentioned, we were founded in 1968, so that means that last year was a milestone of sorts for our organization. It's a notable achievement that a small family-owned insurance agency in rural Nebraska has become, over a 50-year time period, one of the largest marketing organizations, thanks to its relationships with independent agents such as yourself. That behemoth status applies to both the Medicare Advantage and Medicare Supplement worlds, and it's because of a full insurance portfolio that includes MA programs, Medicare Supplement programs, and standalone Part D plans, but also a portfolio of products that includes life insurance and annuity plans, including final expense life insurance and pre-need programs, long and short-term care programs, disability income plans, and ancillary benefits that include dental, vision, and hearing programs, critical illness and cancer plans, and hospital indemnity programs. That Medicare Advantage portfolio includes all the big boys and a number of the strong regional carriers that make a difference to you in your market, and that same philosophy carries over into the PDP area, where the standalone drug programs give you an opportunity to be competitive in that space and offer the programs that you need for your Medicare Supplement, or folks who choose to self-insure in the basic health programs. Our Medicare Supplement portfolio is very robust. It also includes a number of tools available to you without cost that helps you be very, very competitive and proficient in that space. The ancillary product portfolios follow that same philosophy as well. A number of the major carriers in each of those subcategories, where you have a niche market that not only takes care of a need for your prospects and clients, but also creates an additional revenue stream for you and your agency. When we look at the Medicare market opportunity overall, you don't get on a program like this without somebody telling you about the baby boomers aging into Medicare and how that is having such a dramatic effect on the number of prospects that are out there for folks who work in this space. Quite true. But if you look at it only as a segment of the population that's turning 65, you're missing a good percentage of the Medicare opportunity, because there are about a sixth of the people that access Medicare benefits because of medical disabilities, and they are solid prospects for you for many of the products that you have to offer. It's a diverse population with a number of things that come into play that make a need for a varied product portfolio a necessity. Because of the multitude of physical conditions the population endures and the challenges they have with finances in many areas, having a well-rounded portfolio helps make you successful regardless of the demographics of the population that you're visiting with. Because when people come into Medicare, as you're aware, there's a couple of different ways that they can access their care. They can stay in the traditional Medicare administration and supplement that coverage, either by self-insuring or picking up a Medigap policy and a Part D plan, or go into Part C programs where the coverage is administered by a third party. And this gives us an opportunity for multiple products across the board and a way to leverage the assistance programs that we're going to speak of today in order to help people regardless of what may be their best fit for health coverage. When people age into Medicare, we are seeing through Deft Research's latest study that it's being about an even split of folks that are choosing Medicare Advantage versus Medicare Supplements. And so once again, that reinforces our need for a varied portfolio. When we look at some of the changes that come about because of governmental regulations in the enrollment periods coming into 2019, we see a number of changes that affect today's topic. But specifically, some of the basics of the enrollment periods have remained the same. The annual election period and the non-enrollment period are exactly the same, but we have a challenge when it comes to the old MADP period that normally took place from the 1st of January to Valentine's Day, February 14th. It went away and was replaced by OEP for the first 3 months. Since we're past that, let's consider the fact that there are many and varied special election periods that allow us to address this population month in and month out. And we're going to discuss how some of those have changed as well because of the topics that we look at today. When you look at this enrollment period, this is a nice graphic lent to us by United Healthcare's Medicare and Retirement Division that gives us a timeline of those different enrollment periods and their description for those periods as well. And it's important to note that when we deal with different carriers in this space, they each give us a number of tools that help us remain compliant in dealing with a population that has a great deal of oversight. So United, Humana, Aetna, a ton of the different players that are out there, Anthem, they all have their different election period assistance programs that help us make certain that we do the right thing and we do it compliantly for the folks we visit with. As I mentioned, some of the changes that came about in the enrollment periods for our population that we're speaking of today, those that are of low income subsidy or perhaps a dual status, the SEP for this program split into multiple SEPs, but one of the big things that really came about is the fact that it's no longer a continuous monthly SEP where a person could change their coverage month after month should they choose to do so. It's now a quarterly SEP through the first 3 quarters, and then the last quarter, of course, they are subject to the same rules as everyone else with the open enrollment period at the end of the year from October 15th through December 7th. There are also some limitations placed on the SEP that we had not seen before, and this is on the folks that are potentially at risk or at risk for the misuse of frequently abused drugs, and that a person can then be denied a special election period based on some of their medication use and how it comes about. So each of the carriers are asking us to be very aware of the population that we're dealing with, and that as we address the different programs that a person may be eligible for in this demographic, that we consult with the producer help desk of the different carriers in question and make certain that they can check systems for us to see if that SEP has already been taken advantage of or if perhaps is still there for us. So it's important for us to remain in good constant communication with the carriers in order to make certain that this SEP is valid for us to use. Because there is a big push to make certain that we take care of and address the opioid crisis that our country is undergoing, and making certain that if this SEP is not a valid opportunity for someone to change, there may be other election periods that might suffice and might be valid for us with the population that we address. So as we look at this, once again, we realize that the different programs have changed a little bit in the fact that it's gone from monthly to quarterly. There are multiple steps within the dual LIS SEP, and that it is available for certain at-risk individuals, but it may be limited as well. So this gives us some information about how that SEP period comes into play. And remember then that if someone takes advantage of it during a quarter, there's only one chance to change during a quarter, and it still takes effect the first of the following month after the election is processed. So someone electing a change in the month of May, as we are in right now, it would be the 1st of June, and it would not be put off until the 1st of July for an effective date. So some certain things that we still have to be aware of and how it works, regardless of the split of those different facets of this special election period. So there are different pieces that come into play too, depending upon if the person has the ability to change because of or not because of the medication use, but also the different things that come into play if they were auto-enrolled because of where they live, or the circumstances of not selecting a program per se on their own. They qualified for a different type of assistant and the government automatically enrolled them into a program. So there are subsets that we have to be aware of. How do we know what plans are available in what particular area? And why would this come into play when we're talking about LIS and SEPs, LIS and dual beneficiaries? Well, because the vast majority of the programs that deal with the dual population have different requirements as to eligibility there, and it may be dependent upon the level of assistance that a person gets through a Medicare Savings Program. So our friends at Medicare.gov are our good buddies once again, where we can check the different health plans that are available, search through the special election periods that are available for special needs programs, looking at 2 of the 3 categories, those folks that are dual beneficiaries, and for those who may qualify for a move based on a chronic condition. We generally look past a lot of the long-term care facility SEPs because 1, the plans aren't as generally available, but 2, as a general rule, they're not available for the broker population either. But it then tells us that there are different programs available in different areas with different qualifying factors. And when we look at the programs that are dictated by income and assets, or a lack thereof, we see 5 major carriers that come into play in this area, with a bit of movement now since this slide came out, with some different mergers and acquisitions that come into play. This is back from March with the Mark Farah and Associates information that's made available, and we see the big companies that are active in this area. So you've got some different information that's available for you here today with resources, and you got a ton of them that are going to be coming to you as attachments to today's presentation follow-up, so watch for that. When we look at this segment, why do we spend so much time on it, John, and why are you looking at a segment where we're talking about assistance programs based on income and assets, when as insurance individuals we're selling programs where people generally need to have the income in place in order for them to take advantage of plans that are out there? Well, when we speak of the LIS and dually population, we're talking about a similar type of demographic, but we're looking also at a population that has a different mindset. The low income subsidies are folks that are what we refer to as the near poor. And these are folks that are right above the federal poverty level, and then are generally eligible for some additional assistance programs, don't normally have it in place, and many times don't even know they qualify for it. And they're the folks that are struggling to get along. You know, they don't have all the dollars they need for the month that they have in many circumstances, and it's a big chunk of that Medicare population. You have a ton of people that are 65 plus, and a good percentage of them live in poverty, and a good percentage of them live below $24,000 a year. The majority of this population has some form of debt, and they also have, if you look at it, an average spending higher than their income. And they are generally eligible for a sizable amount of additional benefits should they know of it, and should they be able to complete the qualification process to get it in play. This is information taken from the National Council on Aging, and this is a great tool for us to use in many circumstances when we go to assist people, not only for LIS and MSP programs, but other assistance programs that they may be eligible for. And we see a number of carriers that work hand in hand for some labeled type of access to the National Council on Aging benefits checkup as well. You'll see Anthem, Aetna, a number of the different carriers co-op with this organization to make certain that people can access the tools they need to find out if they do qualify for additional assistance. There are other carriers that have their own programs set up. United Healthcare does a very good job with this type of assistance as well. But this is a nice third-party influence that you can use in order to help people find whether or not they are eligible for additional assistance. Why do we become so concerned with this? Well, because folks in these categories get additional assistance, and they may get additional means of making their life easier. We have a couple of videos here that help go through some specifics on the topics that we visit on today with the low income subsidy extra help and the Medicare Savings Programs. So these links are live, and they will take you to videos should you choose to do it. The Part D Extra Help Program, LIS, this can really help folks who have Medicare Part A and B to switch to a Part C plan, should that be the right program for them. And it will affect the plan premium specific to the prescription benefit, or if there is a plan penalty in place because the person didn't take a Part D program when they were first eligible. It does also affect the copayments, coinsurance, and the coverage gap of their prescription coverage, regardless of the plan that they select, but it does not affect the drugs that are part of the formulary, any step therapy or quantity limits the plan may have put in place for that particular program. That is why it's very essential for us that if a person has been auto-enrolled into a prescription program and they have low-income subsidy, that we do a thorough analysis of the medications they take, how often they take them, what dosage they take, to see if the plan that they were auto-enrolled in best serves their purpose, because they may be taking medications that are not part of that list, and it may be causing some true economic stress for them that we can easily address by doing that analysis and changing coverages. When we look also at how this gives a person an opportunity to change or drop the coverages, obviously, it gives them the opportunity to affect any type of premiums that come into play. Normally, if someone is auto-assigned, that is on a program that is at or below the national average, but there are some circumstances where we could perhaps help the folks because of the way that this affects copayments, coinsurance, and the coverage gap, and can make a big difference in how well that plan works for them. So these types of programs then also give them an opportunity to change the coverage that is embedded in their health coverage on an MAPD program, with those same effects coming into play. Most folks don't realize that a zero premium Medicare Advantage program may actually be a Medicare Advantage program with a premium that is subsidized by the low income subsidy component that comes into play. You'll see certain MA carriers that will work this type of arrangement aiming at this particular population, place a premium on the medication portion of the coverage, intending that to be subsidized by the low income subsidy, and use those additional dollars to expand benefits elsewhere. So that's something that's important for us to note. When we look at the different Medicare savings programs, this of course gives us an opportunity not only to change plans, but also plan types in certain conditions. It gives us the opportunity that if a person is of a proper level of qualification, generally a QMB or below, it gives us an opportunity to put them in a dual SNP program where the benefits are much richer. There are certain markets with certain carriers only that may also allow enrollment of a SLMB or a QI1 into a D-SNP program with the same benefit structure. It doesn't always work that way. So it's important for us to know the plans that are in our network of available programs in our target markets, I should say, and it gives us then the opportunity to really additionally address the financial needs of the folks that we visit with and still deliver superior medical care. There are also different things that the MA program can be affected by these MSPs as well, because if a person didn't take their Part B premium when they were first eligible, that too may have a penalty, and the Medicare Savings Programs will take care of that penalty as well. So there are different pieces that come into play as to how these assistance programs will affect the base medical coverage and the medication coverage that an individual has available or selects or may be assigned to them in certain circumstances. So we want to make certain that we go through and we look very carefully at how these different assistance programs enable us to positively affect the choices that someone's already made. And it is an opportunity for us as an agent to maximize those plan benefits, minimize the challenges they have between the different plan choice and costs that come into play, and actually help folks that we've enrolled into a program greater benefit by our knowledge of how the systems work, and give us the opportunity to further drive up our persistency on these programs. One of the reasons many of us work this segment is the fact that persistency of these plans are very strong, but we have ways to drive them to even further heights and create a sort of marketing groundswell, in a matter of fact, by helping people become even more satisfied with their programs, positively affect their out-of-pocket exposure, and create a marketing system, in a manner of speaking, where they tell their friends and neighbors and relatives about us and give us an opportunity to sell even more. So knowing these programs and some of the bases of the information that we're about to go through give us a number of positives that we bring to the table simply by knowing what we're doing in this particular space. What it does is it really helps us truly deliver on what might be best for the prospect and client that we have in play. It helps make your product in that household harder to replace, because if you don't do this and someone who comes behind you does, they can bump you out of the household. And this is a way to do it. They're creating a SEP, so an opportunity to change that coverage. And because of the additional assistance these programs deliver, it's a superior benefit. That kind of rolls into the third bullet point here, where there are certain times of the year where a person may qualify for a certain program, and it may not be the richest one in that area, but it might be the one they qualify for at that point in time. Having these additional assistance programs in place can really enhance those benefits that you have with a program that might be replaced during the next open enrollment period. It also gives you that opportunity to make that change because it creates that special election period. And if the person hasn't had the assistance in the past and you help them get that assistance, you're creating that SEP, so you know that quarterly special enrollment period is there for you. And even if you run across someone who has the coverage, this additional assistance in place, it gives you the opportunity to have a means to change that coverage, should it be best for all involved, on a quarterly basis. It also helps you manage your time, because during certain times of the year, you're looking for a prospect that you have an opportunity to change. This creates that prospect through what is referred to as the lock-in period, but it also gives you a time in the open enrollment period, in the annual election period, to manage when you schedule your appointments by the urgency that comes about with, well, gee, if I don't get this done during the annual election period, that's their only shot of changing. They don't have a SEP other than this. So that's something to take and keep in mind. It also gives you the opportunity for a higher likelihood of a referral, because if you're giving people these assistance, this additional assistance, and they have someone who is able to speak to friends and neighbors who are of similar circumstance, it really increases your likelihood of a referral. And if you deal with people that are on a regular type of a program and they don't know they qualify for assistance, at least on their medication coverage, you're dealing with a different mindset than a full dual beneficiary who has had full coverage in the past and doesn't expect a lot different. It's the old, I have everything I paid for now, what are you going to give me? Well, that's when you got to rely on the coordination of care and the extra benefits. You don't have that same sort of mindset with someone that you're getting additional assistance, particularly at this time of the year where some of the heavy utilizers are starting to go into the coverage gap, help with the cost of those medications. When we look at low income subsidy overall, keep in mind that the projected basic premium in 2019 is $32.50. It's a little bit down from 2018, believe it or not. 2020 is going to be interesting to see because of some of the subsidies brought about by the Affordable Care Act's dollars that come into play, believe it or not, on the Part D programs go away. It's going to be interesting to see what 2020 will bring. But that's the guideline, that if a person doesn't select a Part D program or an MAPD program, becomes newly eligible for this assistance, the government will actually do a rotation of carriers that are available to them at that premium or below and assign them prescription coverage. That means that they aren't doing some of the research you do when it comes to what drugs are on the formulary, what tier they fall in, are there the quantity limits or step therapy that comes into play. So that's where your role as an investigator for their coverages really can make a difference. And for those who come into the coverage gap or don't enroll for 2019, we are still seeing a narrowing of that gap where 25% of the cost of name brand drugs are still their responsibility unless the plan dictates otherwise, 37% of the cost of generic medications. So this is an opportunity for us to really be of service, both by doing an analysis, took me a while to say that word, of the medications they have in place and where they fall on a formulary list. So this then does give you additional information on the regional benchmarks and the IRMA coverage, which you don't deal with nearly as much for the lower income because IRMA is actually additional premiums that a person pays based on their income. And we'll have a graphic demonstration of that in just a little bit. That Part D coverage can make a huge difference for this population because the average annual value of this coverage is about $4,000. And for someone to qualify for this assistance, they're below the median income. And if you look at the median income back in 2016 is $26,200, and the value of this coverage is $4,000. That's a hefty increase in disposable income for these folks. So it gives them an opportunity to, in many circumstances, to have enough dollar for the month that they have each and every month. When you look at some of the surveys that are put into play as to how many people have this assistance in place, well, Kaiser Family Foundation tells us that 6 in 10 Part D enrollees are receiving LIS subsidies if they're enrolled in standalone PDP programs. So as you encounter those individuals, you have a prospect. And a third of the folks that are in an MAPD program are also in an LIS situation. So this gives us an opportunity to realize that a good portion of the folks that are accessing these type of programs that we market day in and day out have an opportunity to change their programs if it's appropriate, and someone is there to deliver the information they need to make a informed decision based on the medications they take, the costs that are associated with those drugs, and their medical cost as well, and look at things on an overall basis. And does that then make their current choice of a health plan or prescription plan the best fit for them moving forward? What it also does in many circumstances is give additional access to prescription drug coverage. Many times you'll see the lower income population accessing care centers that rely very, very heavily on generic medications. And in certain circumstances, perhaps a name brand drug would be best served for that individual if it's not cost prohibitive. It also helps protect the population from the donut hole, that Part D gap. It does, once again, waive the late enrollment penalty for Part D, creates that special election period on a quarterly basis, and it also triggers an application for an MSP program that might even give them additional assistance beyond their medication cost. There are a number of things going on in the world right now that you can't avoid hearing about on a day-to-day basis nearly, where we speak to the big pharma companies being pulled in front of the Senate asking why they're charging so much for insulation or insulin installation. You will see many of these folks then cut the cost. If you notice that after some of those were called onto the rack there, where they were making a corresponding cut in those costs because they were called out for it. You also see a number of medications being shifted from lower tiers to higher tiers in many circumstances, even if they're generic in nature. And so we have to be aware of not only is a drug on a list, but where does this fall on the list? Because that shift in that formulary placement, according to this Avalar report that is being cited here, that cost patients nearly $6.2 billion in a 4-year period. So that's a lot of money just by moving a drug from one layer to another. And what we're also seeing is this then affects a program like an MAPD plan where the cost of the medications are integrated into the health coverage as well. And this will be interesting to see what happens in 2020 when that cost is going to be even more online, simply because of some of the subsidies going away with the sunsetting of that ACA rider in the program. What we also see is prescribing of newer, more effective medications, and what a huge cost difference that can make for the population we visit with as well. The ever popular, or I should say widely prescribed medication of warfarin is relatively inexpensive. There is, of course, now a newer medication that is a blood thinner, Xarelto, and look at the cost difference. We're going from the most expensive of the 4 pharmacies for the warfarin at less than $8.50 to a nearly $540 cost for the Xarelto for a drug that basically does the same thing. There may be different side effects and other things that come into play there, and there's reasons for a doctor prescribing a medication versus another, but this is also a factor that comes into play with the cost of the medications that our folks are accessing. What LIS does is it delivers upon 2 levels of help for these individuals based on their income and their assets. You have a full help subsidy and a partial help subsidy, and they both help eliminate the Part D coverage gap. It also takes care of a late enrollment penalty for anyone who has this type of assistance. What you have then as well is for the folks who qualify for full extra help, they don't have to worry about the plan premium as long as they're enrolled in a benchmark plan below that average. Remember that $32.50. So if the premium of that plan is below that, they don't have to worry about anything additional out of pocket for the cost of the plan itself. It eliminates the Part D deductible that are in standard plans, and it standardizes the co-payments that that individual makes. This is really a good clue for us as we visit with folks to see if they have a subsidy in place based on what they're paying for a medication. The plan dictates that a generic copay is $3.40 and a brand name copay is $8.50. For those folks that are below 100% of federal poverty level, it's an even lower cost for their medications. And when they reach the catastrophic care that a person would have in a different circumstance where they pay the higher the copay or a percentage of the medications, this then fully subsidizes the cost of those medications. So it can make a huge difference. And this gives you an idea of what it takes for an individual to qualify in the continental United States and the District of Columbia in order to get these types of assistance. So what you have are folks that go clear up to 135% of federal poverty level that qualify for full extra help. For those that only qualify for partial subsidies, they pay either zero premium or a sliding scale premium based on the income. They have a small deductible. In 2019, it's $85, and a 15% coinsurance for the plan covered drugs that are on formulary. If the plan has co-payments for the medications instead, the standardized co-payments are $3.40 for a generic, $8.50 for a name brand drug after reaching that $5,000 limit. If the plan is set up, however, without a deductible and without percentages, and the co-payments are higher than this, this then trumps what's in play on the plan design itself. What you see, however, is on many of the Part D standalone programs that are very inexpensive on premium, when you look at it gauged on a comparison based on what the plan costs per month on a premium, you'll note that those are the programs that have a deductible, normally around $500, and some higher copays as well. So this can make a huge difference for those folks who selected a plan based just on the premium. You have the opportunity, of course, because of the special election period that they have, to change that plan choice based on the medications that they take, but this is a way to limit that financial exposure as well. This gives you an idea then of the dollars and the assets test that come into play for this additional help. So as you visit with an individual, if their income is at 150% of federal poverty level or below, there may well be an assistance program, at least for their medications, that you're able to help them obtain through some of the information we're about to give you that can really make a huge difference as to what they pay for the cost of their medications. This slide and a number of the ones to follow are taken out of a National Council on Aging attachment that we're going to send along with the presentation. So it will make a difference as a nice resource for you to access. So at this point in time, before we go on a little further, let's check on some questions. A person has a individual who's dual eligible. How do they find out if a plan will offset the specialty copay? Well, the specialty copays are normally a 4 or 5 tier medication, and they also fall into these different assistance programs. And what you can do in those circumstances is, if they're already on a plan, call the plan itself off of the member card or the card that they deliver to the pharmacy as they access their medications, or if the specialty drug is administered in the office, in a provider's office, you may have a Part B medication instead of a Part D drug. Keep that in mind. And they were able to tell you exactly what those costs are for those medications based on the subsidy level and the medication that comes into play. And that's the question that we have so far. As we go into the full income subsidy differences and how it affects the person on a month-to-month basis, this gives you an idea as to what the financials are to help a person qualify for full income subsidy. Oh, great, John. It's telling me meet state Medicaid financial eligibility. Help me with a little more on that. We have a different chart coming up here that'll give you dollars and cents per month. This is giving you an annual basis too, to make it a little easier for you to visit with someone and speak to a limit of income that a person has in order to get some additional assistance. Same sort of thing applies on the partial subsidies. One of the nice things to realize with this is you are an advocate for the beneficiary. You're not the person making the decision. And so you don't want to represent yourself as such by any means, but it also then gives you the opportunity to be a little less concise as to it's going to be $21,570 a year and that's it. Well, maybe not. Is it a single? Is it a couple? That sort of thing. And if you have someone who's in the area, it never hurts to put in an application because there may be things going on behind the scenes that you're not aware of that can make a difference to you. You'll notice these last couple of slides, they speak to Hawaii and Alaska. Well, they have higher income limits there than they do in the continental United States. Well, they should. Everything else is much more expensive up or out there as well. Some of the things that count as income, Social Security benefits do, and remember, that's a gross amount, not a net amount. Most folks, as they have been on Social Security for a while, that's where they have their Part B premium deducted from, and so the countable income is the gross amount before that premium is pulled, so that comes into play. Pensions and annuities will have a factor or factors in countable income, including veterans pensions, wages if they're still working part-time or full-time, that comes into play, alimony, and if they have a rental facility or rental property, that also counts as income as well. Some of the things that are excluded are SNAP programs, fuel assistance programs, the basic disregard program of the $20 monthly and unearned income, regardless of the source, and then work-related expenses for folks who get Social Security benefits for a disability or blindness. There's a full breakdown of these in a cheat sheet on the National Council on Aging site with this hot link right here for you. Some additional things that count as resources, well, if they've got a checking account, a savings account, CDs, dollars in there are there. If they're going to declare income at home, I don't care if it's in a mason jar buried in the backyard, if they're declaring it, it'll count. As will stocks, bonds, savings bonds, mutual funds, all these different lovely numbers and letters for tax-favored type of savings accounts. They count as a resource, as does real estate outside of the primary home. Certain trusts will allow a person to revoke or have different direct use or access to funds, and that can come into play as well. Some of the things that are excluded, the house in which they live in, regardless of the value, all vehicles, household goods, so their furniture and dishes and all that are come into play. Cash surrender value of life insurance policies are not included. In-kind support, so these are perhaps they have a daughter that pays their electric bill every month, that sort of thing. An irrevocable burial trust. A lot of our folks in our final expense division are very helpful in helping set some of this up in order to help these people as well. There are ways, multiple ways that a person can go in and apply for the help. Certain carriers will have assistance programs to help the people do that. Certain medical groups do as well. But then, of course, you can also act on an individual's behalf through Social Security's website or through the benefits checkup site in conjunction with the individual as their assistant to this application process. The online application is available in both English and Spanish, and they accept electronic signature to complete the application. So it's very expedient. It does away with our chickenese challenge that some of us have when we fill out a paper application where people can't read what we're writing. You can obtain a paper form should you choose to do so from the Social Security office, either by mail or stopping by. But keep in mind, you submit paper, it's going to take longer for these folks to get their determination letter. The benefits checkup site is really cool too, because it also might help them find additional programs they may qualify for as help. We'll go through some of those additional ones later in the presentation, and different SHIP centers in the state have them available. But that online resource is a great way for them to do things very expediently and with a minimum of hassle, simply by completing it online and signing it online. Here we've got some different hot links that are helpful for you for the benefits checkup piece, and then additional information for you on the different programs available, and an explanation type of scenario here for you with the National Council on Aging. Things to keep in mind when folks apply for the Extra Help program: online is easier and faster. It doesn't require any verifying documents up front. They'll use the federal records to verify the answers. If a paper form is incomplete, the Social Security office will follow up by phone to do it. But remember, if you're doing it online, it won't let you submit an incomplete application. So that helps with the timeliness of that process as well. It also has instruction sheets available in 15 different languages on the Social Security site. So if a person has a different mother tongue, in a manner of speaking, it gives them an opportunity to get the help in the language that they're more comfortable with. Once again, a reminder, a person who is deemed eligible for LIS, well, those that have Medicaid SSI or an SS or Medicare Savings Program don't need to apply for LIS separately, because they automatically get it, and they get a government letter saying you already have this. This is what the online versus paper applications look like on the Social Security website. It's asking for some basic information that you'd expect: who the person is, how you identify them, are they married or single, because remember, you've got a household difference when it comes to the assets test and income test for the assistance, and how much that money is and where it's coming from. It also asks if there are other individuals in the house, because that might have play as to whether or not a person qualifies at a higher income limit based on the size of the household. And generally, they'll receive a letter of approval or denial within 10 to 14 business days. It's a pretty quick process, relatively speaking, for the government. We talked already about the automatic enrollment that a person has. If they don't select a plan, the government will facilitate that enrollment, called auto enrollment, and they're basically a listing of carriers who qualify based off the benchmark, and they roll through them. The person has a right to opt out or choose a plan, obviously, but if they don't, the government's going to assign one to them. And that's why our skill set with knowing that different programs have different drugs covered at different rates makes a big difference as to what that person would come out of play or out of pocket for the different drugs that are they're prescribed, and it might even affect which medications are prescribed for them, simply because many physicians will change the medication that might be working well for an individual based on the fact that, well, hey, it's not covered under this plan. Well, it might be under a different one, and that might make things easier for them. Once again, it's gone from a monthly to a quarterly SEP, and so you have the opportunity to do things throughout the year. This is a change for 2019, where it went from a monthly opportunity to change to a quarterly opportunity to change. And the government does a very good job in supplying information to individuals about the programs that are available because of their income and assets. The challenge is many of these folks, much like us with The mail that we get, we don't always read it. So having you there as a third party to help them review the mailings that they receive and the options that they have, and being that personal touch to help them with the different assistance programs can make all the difference in the world for this population. You have a ton of different pieces of information that can help you speed up the process just by being familiar with the application process and knowing what's coming next. And having this information on your state gives you an opportunity to create a much more reasonable expectation as to whether or not they're going to get help or not too. There's no sense in driving up someone's hopes if you know they're not going to qualify. Additional, once again, fact sheets are available for you during these hot links here, and it includes the direct link into that online application through Social Security. Medicare Savings Programs, these are actually Medicaid administered programs held in conjunction with the state in which the person holds residence. They help cover Medicare premiums and cost sharing for folks who don't qualify for full Medicaid. We'll talk about the different layers of assistance and how they're known as different things throughout the country because, well, we all have our own way of speaking of things. And one of the things that we'll show you here, bear with me, coming at you now, is another National Council on Aging piece that'll come to you that speaks to not only the income qualifications, income and assets qualifications for this program, but what it delivers. But it also speaks to state specifics and what different states call these programs as well. You also have another factor that comes into play in the fact that there are certain states that have demonstration programs going that if a person is a dual beneficiary, a true dual, they may be in an MMA program that is administered by the state that is not a plan available for us as brokers to assist with. So, nice way of saying, don't mess with it because you don't get paid wanted anyway. And if you're basically dealing with those programs and you're counseling someone to get off of one of those programs, you could get into some hot water. But this also then gives you the names of the nomenclature for the different systems of the plans by state as well. Speaking of what these programs are known by in those different states. You see basically three levels of assistance that come into play in most circumstances, and they include a qualified Medicare beneficiary. This is a person who's up to 100% of federal poverty level. It's going to pay the Part A premium if it's applicable, and the Part B premium and the penalty, should there be one. It also pays the Part A and B deductibles, co-payments, and co-insurance. Gee, John, then what's that leave for private insurance? The extras, the things that you're hearing about so much now with additional transportation, meals after hospital confinement, additional dental, vision, or hearing coverages, different programs of that nature. You also see the infamous help by falling and I can't get up buttons, the personal alert pieces. Carriers won't call them that because that's a specific brand advertisement, but that's the sort of assistance that may be available for those individuals. And generally across the board, in order for someone to be eligible for a dual special needs plan, they've got to have QMB status or better, full Medicaid. You have two additional levels of assistance as well that deal with the specified low-income beneficiaries, where this pays the Part B premium. The qualified individual, the QI1 individual, which also pays the Part B premium. They came about at different times and were funded differently in the past. In order for a person to be eligible for these assistance programs, they've got to have the Medicare coverage that is required, and they have to meet certain income and resources tests, just like you saw with the low income subsidy. There are, however, some differences in those income levels depending upon the state, but more frequently where you see a difference is 8 states don't have an assets test. So a person in Arizona may qualify for this assistance, move to the great and sovereign state of Texas, And where there is an assets test, then they may not qualify for the help based on that particular parameter. It is a program that's generally submitted through the local Medicaid agency. Many of them are housed in Social Security offices. You'll see different social workers come into play at different locations as well. Post-hospital stage, you see a lot of it. It is also that process that we referred to a little bit earlier, where someone has completed a low income subsidy application, extra help application, it starts the application process for this as well. This eligibility is generally redetermined each and every year. There's also an additional Medicare Savings Program that's very different than the other 3 MSPs, and this is for the qualified disabled working individual, a bit different in play, much higher income and assets tests, different qualifications for additional assistance. You see with these numbers, these are just disabled folks that are working and getting medical care, and they may not have the same sort of assistance as the other levels that we spoke of. I mentioned the fact that these assistance programs were put into play at different times by different pieces of legislation. One of the things that you see consistently is each of these coverages, a good portion of the folks that qualify for the assistance don't have it in place. That's why having some key numbers as part of your presentation material may help you identify these individuals and help them obtain the additional assistance that they are entitled to. It's a great piece that comes into play. It's also something that you have to keep in mind is not true Medicaid, and many of these folks will have some challenges with social stigma or worry about the perhaps recovery of some of these costs, like you see for folks that qualify for Medicaid when they go into a long-term care facility. Different animal comes into play here. There's no estate recovery with this. It does still cover that Part B late enrollment, and folks that qualify for this assistance automatically get the LIS help. This is the piece that we mentioned a little bit earlier as to what Part B premiums come into play. For the programs we're speaking of today, IRMA doesn't have a bearing, but this is for folks that are of higher income and what they have to pay for their Part B premium based on that income. If you're one of the agents that deal with higher income individuals and deal with estate planning, this is more germane to some of the discussions that you have. However, just wanted to make you aware of the IRMA limits that come into play. These programs are a basic opportunity for two segments of the government to work together, the states and CMS. And they come together to provide this type of help where the federal government oversees the program, they match the funds for the QIMBYs and SLIMBYs, and provide 100% of the cost for the QI1s through that block grant through MACRA. However, the state is the one that administers the program, determines the eligibility, pays that Part B premium on behalf of those who qualify for it, and the additional assistance that comes into play. For someone to be eligible, they got to meet the income and assets test once again, and submit the applications and qualify for it continuously each and every year. Remember, some of the excluded assets include a house and a car, regardless of the value of that house and car, and certain additional resources that would be considered liquid. That history, once again, big chunk that qualify that don't have it in place. There is also an opportunity here for a slide that gives you basically the information you need to throw out some generalities to see if a person would qualify. On every appointment I went on, I used to visit with the folks after I completed the general presentation, and not to make any assumptions as to the person's financial status based on where they lived, because you can't really tell. You could always throw out a number of, one of the things that I want to do is maximize the benefits that you may be entitled to, and one of those is additional assistance on either your medical cost or perhaps on the cost of your medications. And what the government has is a program set up for folks who have a gross monthly income as an individual of a little under $1,600 a month. If your income is below $1,600 gross and you have an liquid assets of less than $14,500 thereabouts, you may qualify for some additional assistance. Does that fit your particular situation? And you know, during the discussion with folks that are in this bracket, that generally they say, well, I don't have any other income besides my Social Security check. What's your Social Security check? They give you that amount. You got to back in the Part B premium, because remember, that's deducted from it. And it gives you an opportunity to do a roundabout way of seeing if they qualify for any assistance at all. So having this sheet in your presentation manual is very helpful for you as just a reference piece. Remember, you're not the one granting those assistances, but you can help them qualify for them. Some of the reasons why they don't have it in place, well, sometimes they just don't know that it's there. The government did a very good job when Part D rolled out talking about the assistance that was available, the extra help programs. You don't see it quite as much anymore. And the Medicare Savings Programs aren't preached much the same way. And then even if some folks do know that these programs exist, they might have challenges with the application process or getting to some place where someone can help them. And then that we're dealing with a proud generation or two that feel that this may be welfare and they don't want anything to do with it. It's an entitlement program based on monies they've paid into the system, and it's there for them to use. So being aware of the different assistance programs that come into play and knowing some of these base numbers can really help you make certain that you're helping your folks get all the benefits that they qualify for. And you're becoming involved with that process can make a huge difference as to whether or not they come into place for these folks. Because you know how it is, I'll get around to it. That round to it never comes out of their pocket. And having you there just basically to walk through the system can really make a difference. And for the folks that are really entrenched in the dual market, being familiar with some of the additional programs that we'll reference later in the presentation can really make you a source of information for the community and add to the marketing potential that you have with different centers of influence in your target market. So some different things, once again, that come into play. They got to have A and B. They got to have it in place. You can help them with the different stipulations that come into play. There are different forms in different states that come into consideration for the folks. And remember, if someone qualifies for the MSP program, they automatically get LIS. If they qualify for LIS, it can start the process for qualification for the Medicare Savings Programs. You can help people with this application process by directing them to the Social Security office, setting up an appointment with the individual for the social workers that are there, and hoping that they're able to follow through. Or you can utilize some of the resources that you have with the carriers that you work with, the My Advocate service with United Healthcare, or the Benefits Checkup service with Aetna or Anthem and a number of other carriers. Or you can actually be proactive and assist in the process yourself if you choose to do so. There are different forms at different lengths depending upon the state in which you reside and where the the beneficiary is as well. And it's an application that needs to be filled out completely and legibly. They are available at the different Health and Human Services offices. In Texas, I think the form now is 12 or 14 pages. You don't have to do a submission of supporting documents. They have to be prepared in the instance that they're questioned on it. There is a look back period. So transferring assets to qualify for these programs, it's a 5-year look back. And if someone gives away money to the church or whatever, they're going to ask to recover it. Are there any exceptions to that process? Very limited in nature. It's going to take 60, in certain circumstances, up to 90 days, depending upon how complicated the process is. And it's important to make certain that we're doing things accurately and not rounding off with some of the dollars that we're putting into play. There are also different pieces of legislation, depending upon the state in which you reside, as to the different balance billing factors that come into play with dual SNP plans and some of the dual lookalikes that are seeing a lot of scrutiny from the government in different areas now. So that's something to be aware of. But generally, if someone qualifies for a qualified Medicare beneficiary status, that means they're at 100% of federal poverty level or below. They're not to be balance billed. That QMB individual, that pays for their Part A and B deductibles and cost sharing. These folks should not be sold a Medigap policy. You'll see many of the people that may be a SLMB or a QI1 prefer a Medicare Supplement policy over a Medicare Advantage program. That's their prerogative. But in many circumstances, that may be their best choice. And if you consider the assistance they get in those two levels of Medicare Savings Programs, it's saving them their Part B premium, but it's not helping them with the cost. So they have to look at some different alternatives, particularly if Medicare Savings Programs have limited networks in their area, or there are other concerns to the individual. So some things that come into play that are a case-by-case basis. Some of the things that also come into play is the difference between these programs and the assistance someone has when they go into a nursing home. It's different qualifications, different look back, different resource recovery as well. We've talked already about the fact that if a person doesn't make a choice and they qualify for LIS, the government's going to do it for them. Some of the things that also can come into play, well, we've talked about most of this here. You have different fact sheets and eligibility charts made available to you as well through these different links, and we want to make certain that you have all the information available to you. This is a really cool piece from the National Council on Aging through this website that will have an opportunity for you to share it on social media. And so if you are looking to become involved in this market very heavily, I surely recommend that you create a Facebook account if you don't already have one, or if you want to keep it separate, your business from your personal separate, create a business account and share this particular video, because it will give you the opportunity to brand yourself in that part of the world as an individual who knows what they're talking about on Medicare Savings Programs, and it's a very nice piece that comes into play. You have also PowerPoints deliverable from the National Council on Aging for Medicare Savings Programs, Low Income Subsidy, that you can use as a basis of presentations and seminars in centers of influence. So these are pieces the government, or pardon me, this agency has put together that are compliant and give you the opportunity to deliver the information knowledgeably and confidently. You also have programs available, same sort of presentations available for the SNAP programs. Used to be food stamps, pardon me. The Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program is another presentation that's available for you, as is the SSI program. You get into this area, you're talking about people that are at below 100% of poverty level, so be prepared. There are also different pieces that the government makes available to you that you can download and distribute as well. There is a guide, an overall guide to benefits for seniors. I have downloaded this piece, and it is coming to you as part of the resources that will follow up today's presentation as well. It is available in Chinese and Spanish. I downloaded it in English. This is a live link here though, but it can take you to that where you can download it and you can print those copies and you can order them from this organization as well. The cost, I'm going to confess, I don't know what the cost is. Part of the reason why you want to do these programs with Premier is the fact that we went through the portfolio of carriers that are available to you, and we contract with the competitive carriers across the country that specialize in this area. But we also give you additional assistance in contracting with carriers through the creation of an agent profile that gives you an opportunity to contract with multiple carriers electronically. It also gives you the opportunity to pick up discounted errors and admissions coverage for all of the product that you offer in the insurance world, regardless of whom you contract through. There are certain organizations that may place you as part of their blanket E&O coverage if you contract through them. I don't know of anybody in the world that offers everything. So you need coverage for yourself regardless of where it's being contracted through. We also help you make certain that your license stays into play with discounted continuing education bundles and a way to come up with non-cancelable DI coverage for yourself on a modified guarantee issue basis at discounted rates where you share in the commission of those programs, so you can make your own coverage even more robust as well. These programs are generally recorded. You can find them on our website or on our YouTube site. This gives you an opportunity to visit and revisit these programs 24/7, and they're available for you just by clicking the link. We also offer you different electronic support that helps you quote and enroll, both through the Medicare Center program that allows you to do MA programs where you can procure the the scope of appointment remotely and enroll remotely as well. We have a program to put your social media program on autopilot, and we want to make certain that any type of incentive that you are due because of your sales activity you know about and you are able to access. And we actually offer our own producers convention as well, where next year it's a cruise from Miami to the Bahamas. Folks just got back last month from Jamaica. It was a heck of a trip from what I understand. We also offer you different marketing support to get in front of folks. There are different programs that you can cold call for still. Generally, if you're dealing with low income subsidy and Medicare savings programs, those are the type of programs you can't cold call for. But there are different demand programs that can help you put yourself in front of individuals who need that assistance. Dental programs, med sup programs, final expense programs that can make a difference. There are different community-based marketing programs that we can help you with as well, including retail marketing. Walmart is in its second phase of store selection already. CVS is through Aetna in many parts of the country is going on now. There are also additional retail opportunities coming up with other carriers that we want to make certain that you're aware of and take advantage of if that fits your marketing program. We have different programs that help you market to and through faith-based organizations, a key center of influence in many communities, and working with providers, both with the folks that deliver upon the benefits that you are offering through your insurance programs and those that aren't part of those networks. Different ways to make that work for you. Different carriers at different times of the year may have different prospecting opportunities available for you too. We want to make certain that you're engaged with that. We have a pilot program going on now with internet leads in our final expense division. If that's of interest to you, we want to hook you up with our final expense folks to take advantage of that situation. And we do offer direct mail support based on production that can drive down the cost of a mailing, a 1,000-piece mailing, to a very, very reasonable price that you can then afford to take advantage of that opportunity consistently. All that said and done, we've talked for a long time. I threw a lot of numbers at you, but what we want to do is be a resource for you and earn the opportunity to earn your business. We want to work with you, and we want to help you make the decision as to whether or not these different programs can be a valuable part of your personal marketing program. If it is, well, by golly, then let's do it. Let's get it in play, let's be ready to market, and do so consistently, and don't put it off. You can reach any of our health marketers at our toll-free number at 1-800-365-8208 or through our website at premiersmi.com. We welcome the opportunity to visit with you about the programs we've discussed today, low-income subsidy and Medicare Savings Programs, and how that affects the different contracts you already have in place and those that you may need in order to access full benefit to these programs. But that's a decision for you to make, and it's one that we want to give you the information for you to make an informed decision about. All that said and done, I thank you for the time that you spent with us here today. This is the most valuable resource that you have, your time. I'm aware of that, and I thank you for going into helping get additional information through this medium, and we'll make certain that the follow-up comes to you as part of today's presentation. There are a number of different organizations that are out there that can be of key benefit for you in accessing this information. And as an agent noted on today's presentation, your area agency on aging is a great resource for that as well. It's also a great resource for you to partner with, because they may have different events that they sponsor throughout the community that you may be able to access and be a part of as well. All that said and done, we look forward to the opportunity to visit with you in the very near future. And in the meantime, hey, we wish you good selling. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.